Hi all, my name is Glady Ho. I'm a partner at Tay Chambers. As the partner of Tay Chambers, I lead the Department of Corporate, Commercial and Business Advisory. My main practice area is foreign direct investment, strategic shareholding planning, mergers and acquisitions. When a client comes to me, normally they will say, Glady, I have a 50-50 deal. It sounds very fair, right? But to me, when they say about 50-50, my first question is, are you talking about the percentage? Or are you talking about the control right? 50-50 may sound very fair at the beginning. However, do you know that when the business goes further, 50-50 might not be the fairest for all the parties. For example, when you talk about 50, are you talking about the decision right 50-50? Or are you talking about the dividend 50-50? So you must be very clear about what you are talking about the 50-50. A 50-50 might sound fair at the beginning, but when a business goes further, they might lead the business to go into a deadlock situation. A shareholders agreement is not only when things go wrong. You need it when things are good. Because business will no longer be in honeymoon state forever. Like people trust each other, everything all good. No, there might be circumstances where people no longer trust each other or people have dispute over the dividend right, the voting powers and all that. At that place, you will appreciate that if you have a shareholders agreement, we'll put everything in place. You do not have to recall on your memory or rely on your WhatsApp screenshot. We are not exactly who will have the voting right, the dividend power and how to exit from the company. On that note, I will say that shareholders agreement does not replace trust. A shareholders agreement can actually help business to confirm that over the entire shareholding structure, people will maintain good relationship. As a corporate lawyer, I will say that shareholders agreement is not a sign of distrust. Indeed, shareholders agreement will help you to ensure that when business go on, relationship lasts. For a situation when there is 50-50 partnership but there is no shareholders agreement, I think the worst thing that can ever happen is not even that you fight, is when the company cannot move at all. So when we say the company cannot move, right, the company might still have value. You might have a lot of opportunities like the investor want to invest, your company still have a lot of assets and there are many opportunities for you to maybe venture into Singapore or overseas. But however, when the company is stuck, meaning both partners 50-50, the worst thing is the company cannot move. The company cannot decide whether they want to sell the company or they want to let the investor to invest and all. The most expensive dispute is not the biggest scam. The most expensive thing is the company cannot move at all. And when opportunities come, all opportunities actually burn. So when you say that you trust your partner completely, then you do not need a shareholders agreement. As a corporate lawyer, we are very born with. Trust is very important. However, you must remember that trust is not a business mechanism. I always tell my client that if you trust each other, why not to have everything in place? How about the voting right, dividend mechanism, and also the exit mechanism? Because once money comes in, other family members get involved in the operation, and also when there are more investors coming, the conversation might change. People might still be the good people, but their priorities different. So as a corporate lawyer, I would say that a proper agreement does not replace trust. Indeed, it enhances the relationship between the parties and set everything clear. I would say that trust is the foundation, but structure is the safety net. As a corporate lawyer, the most expensive mistake that I see SME owners make is they give shares too easily. I realized that most of the SME owners, they treat shares like a thank you gift. Whoever introduces them business, they will give some share. Employees who stay long in that business, they will give some share. This is very much related to all of you, right? But I must say that share is not unbound. When you give out share, right, you are not just giving the percentage of share. You might be giving your voting rights to dividend, right to access to information, and actually the right for them to block your future plans. Initially, the owner might think that, Glady, no worries, I just give 5% share or I just give 10% share. Very safe, no worries at all. However, do you know that in the event of sale, when you raise funds or someone interested to buy over your company, all these small percentage of share can actually be a big conversation in future. The issue is not whether you should reward people with ownership. The issue is when you give out your shares to someone else, do you have a good structure in giving out those shares? You must remember that the expensive part is not the percentage of share that you have given. The expensive part is the control that you do not know that you have lost. So when we talk about ESOS, right? First, what is ESOS? ESOS is actually Employee Shares Option Scheme, where employers actually have a plan, a policy to think of how to give their shares to their employee, whether by giving them the right to buy the shares at a lower than market price, or maybe they can buy shares after they achieve certain KPI. So this is ESOS. Glady, when should we do ESOS? When will ESOS make sense to our SME? So I would say that ESOS will make sense if you realize that you have people who are valuable enough in your company that can help company to grow together. It will make sense to an SME. So when you have people that can build company together, for example, very key management team or very important personnel that can help your company to grow further, it's the time where ESOS will make sense to you. Because you will send a very important message to them. We are not just working for the company. We are actually a team that we can build company together and help the company to grow together. However, ESOS will become overkill when you thought that you want to grow an ESOS scheme, but your company has no clear KPI plan for your employee and no vesting structure, and you do not know whether you want to give the shares to an employee as a gift or want them to buy over the shares at a certain price. Without a plan, ESOS will definitely kill a company. So for SMB, my view is very simple. Do not simply use ESOS scheme just because ESOS sounds cool, sounds modern. No, you should actually implement ESOS scheme where you know that who do you want to retain and what is the KPI that you hope those employees to achieve before you want to give them shares. You must remember that for ESOS, it's not a decoration. ESOS is actually when you have someone important that you want to keep in the company, retain them in the business, then you will implement ESOS scheme. ESOS shall not be used to create future shareholders who will no longer contribute to the company. Crowdfunding can make sense when people know the story of the company, why do they want to raise funds, and they have the ability to handle many investors. That will be when the crowdfunding makes sense to the company. However, I will say the real pitfall is people has the vision and they know why they want to get the money in. However, they forget what they're gonna do for the money. What's next? You must remember that once you accept crowdfunding, you have a right to report to all your investors. You need to let them know what the money will be used for and what is the next step of the company. You must remember that when you do crowdfunding, you are no longer on your own. Every decision that you are trying to make, you have to report to shareholders and you need to get support from them. My advice is, before you do any crowdfunding, ask yourself, is your account clean? Is your company valuable enough? And do you know that what is the right that you are giving to investors? So if you cannot answer all these questions correctly in your mind, I think you better don't start crowdfunding. If you are going to start crowdfunding, you must clear all this down. Otherwise, crowdfunding may bring in money today for you, but it will create problems in future. So many clients will come to us, Glady, I want to start a business. What should I do? What kind of business vertical that I should choose? So in Malaysia, right, it's very common that we have sole proprietors, partnership, and recently we have LLP, limited liability partnership, and also private limited, which is the Sdn Bhd. For the benefit of all SME, I'm not going to touch Berhad for now. So for all SME owner, I would say that if you are a lone ranger and you are not ready to go far yet, maybe you can consider sole prop or maybe partnership. However, you must bear in mind that in sole prop or partnership, the partners or the person itself, right, the sole proprietor, they will have to bear personal liability. If today you have a goal that you might want to go for IPO, you may want to do fundraising in future, I would suggest that you may consider Sdn Bhd private limited company. Because for Sdn Bhd, right, private limited company, the liability is limited to the company itself. Of course, there are many exceptions. However, if you opt for Sdn Bhd private limited company, you do not have to be personally liable for the debt of the company unless there are any special circumstances. So if you are going to do IPO, fundraising and all that, in general, from the perspective of investor, they will see that a Sdn Bhd is a more capital-ready company. So if you want to go far, you may wish to opt for Sdn Bhd. But of course, there will be some costing regarding the accounting, auditing and all that. But as entrepreneurs, I believe that you all will want to do long-term business, right? And to think from long-term perspective, private limited company may be a suitable choice for you. If you are currently a sole proprietor or you are actually a partner in a partnership, for you to move to the next step as a shareholder in a Sdn Bhd, what you can do is you may consult SSN for conversion, or for partnership company, you may wish to dissolve your current company and then incorporate a new entity as Sdn Bhd. So when we talk about ownership, right, normally SME owner will look at the percentage of share. But however, as corporate lawyer, we are looking at the control, the rights, the risk, and exit plan. Normally my client will come to me, hey Glady, I have 70% shares in the company, I'm the founder, and the funder have 30% share in the company. So I think I'm safe. However, as corporate lawyer, my next question is, okay, so Mr. ABC, who are the directors? Who will have the right, a greater voting rights in the company, and who has the right to decide whether we shall declare dividend this year or we shall retain the profit of this year and declare dividend next year. And my last question normally will be, as the 30% shareholder, will the minority shareholder has a right to actually go against your plan? So I would say the gap is the owner will look at the number. However, as corporate lawyer, we'll look at the consequence behind the done. A small shareholder may still have a great voting right, and a majority shareholder may still face practical restriction when they want to do fundraising. So on that note, that is why ownership structure is very important. It's just not a pie chart, it's actually a power map. Normally when an owner decides to sell the company, the decision that normally they wish they had made earlier is they clean up the company structure at much earlier stage. Because most of the time, when an investor come in, when they are interested to invest in the company, they will not just look at the profits of the company, but indeed, what they will look at is whether there is any nominee arrangement, who actually control the company, and what is the nature of the company business that actually help the company to generate revenue. And they will also look at whether the owners or for the investor, whether there is a very clear exit path for all the investor and shareholders. Many owners only start asking all these questions regarding their shareholding planning when there is a buyer. However, I would say that would be too late. If you only started to clear out all your shareholding planning and all that when there is a buyer, the buyer will have a stronger bargaining power. If the structure is very messy, the buyer may wish to reduce the price of buying the share to invest in your company, or they may actually walk away from the deal. The decision that owner normally wish they have made earlier is they should treat ownership structure as part of the business value of the company, not just mere admin work. A clean structure does not only prevent dispute, indeed, it enhances the value of the company. So if I can force all SME owners to do just one thing regarding their ownership, I would say to do an ownership audit. Nothing complicated, you just sit back and ask yourself 4 questions. First, who owns the company? Secondly, who has the right of control of the company? And number 3, who has the right to access to all information and also money of the company? And last but not least, and if someone pass away or exit the company earlier, so what will happen to the company? If you cannot answer all these 4 questions clearly, your company structure definitely needs attention. Many owners wait until there is a dispute arise, only then they will check the company structure. But by then, everything will become too expensive. So my advice is very simple. Do the ownership audit as early as possible. Do not wait until a dispute arises only to discover how your company actually structured.